especially the rare bloods, that they need to do that.
Mhm.
The blood bank needs them to do that. But
I have O negative, so I'm definitely one where they want my blood. And I
oh
give it to
yeah,
them.
well, they don't care about mine. They just they tell me not to even try to give because they can't use it.
Wow. Well, that's well, you got a lot more other things to give. There we go. So as we are, let's see, I got an email coming out later today about all the upcoming events. We have a lot coming up here soon, so look for that email. But until then, what do you guys got going on as far as contracts, questions? Don's broker line question of the day has been fantastic. It's funny. Yesterday, his question yesterday, or about the hold harmless, was a topic of discussion with our attorneys here at HomeSmart as well. When I was at Redfin, we had an attorney staff of like 15 attorneys. It's a little different game here. We have 2, and there we would put together a list of special clauses, if you will, that I would write out that agents would be demanding, and then the legal team would prepare them so that the agents can copy and paste them. So I'm working on that here, probably down the road, just so there's certain things that we don't want the agents creating or practicing law, whatever. And also there, they had 2 sort of like templated hold harmlesses, meaning a short version and a long version. And typically it was when a buyer wanted to do work on a property that they didn't own yet. So, and they want and Redfin wanted the brokerage and the agent to be held harmless, or the buyer making a choice of something that could harm them. Generally, that's what we see them for. And so I talked to our corporate attorneys about that. They're thinking about it, about something along those lines, where if you have a situation where you've advised your client not to do something and they choose to do it, a way to protect you in the brokerage. But we don't have a standard hold harmless thing. And the question that we were facing, and one Don talked about on the broker line, was that there's enough forms in place if you do due diligence and cover your tail and document everything to protect you if you're doing the right thing. So the 1925 is one of those forms, which is the walkthrough. And did you choose to do inspection? Did you see it in person? Did you get a home warranty? Did you X, Y, and Z? So the buyer takes accountability for their actions. Yep. Don, anything on that?
Yep. Well, that's right. I mean, that call had to do with a seller who wanted something like that and had asked the agent, "Can you provide me with that?" Well, first of all, no. Even if we had something, but in that case, it's like that what they were looking for was they was looking for this blanket thing, like no matter what you find later on, you can never come back after us. It's like, yeah, good luck with that. There are some rights you just cannot give away.
And first of all, even an attorney wouldn't write something like that because it's too blank and too broad. And so I understand the idea there, but you're going to deal with the problem after the fact anyway. So make sure you're doing your part, advising your client properly, documenting using the proper forms, and then dealing with it later on if it does come to be an issue. But we can't provide things. And along those notes, we got it was one of our broker line emails yesterday that would be good for all of you. It was a former client who had it was a landlord who had a tenant. Tenant was terminating their lease early, and the agent was trying to help the landlord with the agent terminate. We're not property managers.
Nope.
We have no agency relationship. You can't act as a property manager. You can't give them, technically guide them on how to get rid of their tenant. Unfortunately, no matter how close they are, it's like in the conjunction of your relationship of listing the home for rent. Okay. And we can provide forms, but this is one of those things. We have this idea. We want to help everybody out, but we gotta stay in our lane. Without no agency relationship, you're practicing law or you're doing property management, which you can't do. So another reminder that before you do something at the request of one of your friends, clients, whatever, think, is this my lane? Is this something that I should be doing? Or, not just say I can. Any thoughts, Don?
I've always said that, one of the first questions we need to ask ourselves before we answer when somebody asks us to do something for them is, am I the best person to actually do this? And many times the answer is no. And, you know, we think of ourselves as once their agent, always their agent. But other than confidentiality, once that transaction's over, all of those agency requirements are gone. Yeah.
I want to beat a dead horse with this, an old saying, but this is something as the broker from multiple states and from multiple companies. I've seen this at every company I've been with. This problem where, let's say Gail is representing a seller or a buyer. They close on the property and there's a lease after the fact. The seller stayed for 2 weeks. The buyer moved in early, typically, you know, the bad things. But generally now they're trying to deal with getting rid of the seller out of the property so the buyer can take access. Agents working on delivering keys, agents working on getting the seller out of the property. That's not their job. You know, once it's closed, that rental is between the seller and the buyer, or the new owner and the previous owner. And all too often, agents are involved trying to navigate that, and you can't. You know, you're now operating in uncharted. You're a property manager at this point in time. You're practicing law. You're not in an agency relationship. And I've seen that come back to bite the agents way too many times, where now they're in a battle, you know, a legal battle, because of something that happened post closing. So when you're talking to a seller or a buyer, when saying, "Hey, seller wants to, you know, do a short-term rental post closing for 3 weeks," make sure they understand the ramification that they are now a landlord. That is now a tenant. There's tenant laws in place. There are, you know, there's a deposit if any, but all of those things have to take place. Insurance, you know, oftentimes insurance isn't on the property until the buyer takes possession. So do you have a rider for the time when the buyer owns the property and they actually take possession? Does the seller have renter's insurance? You know, these are things that you can guide them up until closing date, but afterwards it's between them. Don?
You can do stuff to try to help them beforehand. I've always found that in the temporary lease, what is it, section 19, that talks about holding over, that when we talk about how much money are they going to have to pay per day if they stay longer than they're supposed to, make that a big number. I mean, I guess depending on which side of the lease we're on, if we're on the side trying to protect the tenant, would be in this case the seller, then maybe not. But if I'm representing the buyer and the seller is going to stay in for 2, 3, 4, 5 days afterwards, and I want to do everything I can to try to make sure that we're not going to run into that problem later on of staying too long, in holding over, I'm sticking in $250, $500 a day. It's like, it needs to hurt. It needs to hurt so much. Staying over hurts so much that it makes more sense to get out than it does to stay. At $50 a day thing, are you kidding? You can't even get an apartment for $1,500 a month. So I mean, it's like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'll stay until the cows come home. Heck yeah.
That's also on your daily rent. If you're a negotiated amount, we see a lot of times they'll put 0. Don't do that, because if they stay, to your point, what are you collecting on? You're collecting on 0.
Yeah,
you know, right? So make it $1. You can waive that amount. You can say, hey, look, it's $150 a day, you know, for the 7 days, and we'll waive this for the 7 days, right? You know, but then you still have a daily rate that if they don't leave, the seller has the right, the buyer now has the right to go after that for that amount, you know, that's not been waived. But if you have 0 there, 1, do you have an enforceable contract? 2, what are you going to recoup, right? With 0.
Yep, no consideration. Yeah, there's nothing. Zero's there. There's no consideration, no contract. And that reminds me of something, Marty. Since you've got so much pull with the Texas Real Estate Commission, I wish you would do something.
Okay, lay it on me.
You know, the form that we now have to fill out for the landlord's disclosure of whether or not the property is in a floodplain, whether or not it has flooded over the last 5 years. You have to use that. That's required on every single solitary lease, including temporary leases. To me, that's crazy. If the seller is staying after closing and the seller is the one who has lived in that house forever how long, and the seller has disclosed through their seller disclosure that the house hasn't flooded before and all that. Now the buyer now has to fill out another document stating exactly the same thing and giving it back to the seller who is staying. It's crazy that temporary leases require that disclosure. That's crazy. So please do something about that.
Okay, yeah, I agree. But and for a lot of you, this came out in 2023 out of a legislative change. So they changed the law and required this, then went through TREC, and of course, it would take a legislative update for that. But maybe through our realtor process and working with the political campaigning, right? We can work on that. So.
It seems crazy that it's required on temporary lease. It's already disclosed on a seller disclosure, so the buyer already knows. The seller obviously knows because they're the ones who had disclosed it to the buyer to begin with. It's crazy.
And obviously, we highly recommend as brokers never, ever, ever, ever let a tenant buyer in early as a tenant. Yeah, it is grounds for so many different lawsuits. Because the buyer may not be able to perform, may not be able to close, then getting them evicted is it's always, it's rarely, if ever, a good idea. So that one should be like a no-brainer. Don't do it. On the seller staying after, to your point, Don, that should be exempted because they were the seller. They have personal knowledge of the property.
They already know. They know more than the buyer does. Who's disclosing it to them?
Exactly right. So,
Yeah.
well, I will do what I can do there.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Because I get blowback when we're doing compliance and I say, well, this temporary lease, now that you're letting the seller stay, you've got to do this. And it's like, well, that makes no sense. It's like, well, I know you're right. Makes no sense, but there it is. So,
yeah.
A little history of that temporary lease. It was created back in 2011. Specifically because real estate commission got sick and tired of real estate agents putting in section 11 of the contract, buyer can move in 5 days prior to closing and pay $50 a day in rent. Because first of all, it's practicing law because you're changing the terms of the contract. But second of all, it nowhere near addresses, like you were saying, to your point, it nowhere near addresses all the things that can happen once that buyer gets in there as a tenant. It's like, well, the buyer has pets. Can they go ahead and bring the pets in early? Gee, I don't know. We didn't talk about that. Well, the buyer smokes. Can they smoke in the house? Gee, I don't know. We didn't talk about that. But what happens if something breaks while the tenant's in there? Who's going to repair that? Gee, I don't know. We didn't talk about that. It just goes on and on and on. Of all the things that can happen. It solves one problem. Where's the buyer going to live for 5 days prior to closing? But it just opens the door for so many other issues. That's why they went ahead and created that temporary lease with 25 provisions in it that still doesn't cover everything that could happen.
Right. And that's why if you ever have a longer period of time, whether you're doing lease purchase, you're doing something with an option to buy, whatever, always use the full lease. Again, we are called to not only have a fiduciary duty to our clients, but that we're held to that higher level for the forms we choose and then how we use them. So make sure we're choosing the appropriate form for the job. Yep. All right.
And the latest version of the form.
Yeah, and the latest version, which is the one that we're running up against now. We're seeing forms from 2018, from 2011. We know you have them saved on your computer, but use the most recent forms. Yeah.
Yep, at least it's 2011, 2018 AD. We'd have dragging in stone tablets and things.
Michelle, you got a question to get us up? Yep.
Yes, on the notes of forms, I'm actually in the process of doing a lease for a client and it also to a lease for myself, which I've already completed. But I wanted to know if do we have like a packet of that we upload like to our computers, that way we could grab them whenever like we're putting them into like our zip forms or our dot loops?
That's kind of where some people get in trouble is they save them on their hard drive and then they get updated and they don't update their ones. Oftentimes zip forms, dot loop, and Afinisign will have the most recent forms in them already. Probably a good way. If you want to save them separately, I would probably check probably every couple months just to make sure that you have the most recent form. Don, thoughts on that?
So you know, in those platforms, you can create templates.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, that's what I was
supposedly,
talking about,
and I know
templates.
Catherine and I have talked about this before. Supposedly, when the forms update, the templates are supposed to update with them, but that does not always happen. So you do have to follow up, go back and check and make sure. I did notice the other day that even with the new IABS that came out that we started to have to use April 1st, my template didn't update with zip forms. It still had the old one.
Don,
Yeah.
if you're the one who created your template, it's never going to update until you do it again.
That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Exactly. So, and also too, I'm having issues like with uploading like my forms to the HomeSmart like site. So how do I get assistance with making sure that that's correct on there to get the credit for my transactions?
So is it when you upload it, it doesn't stick, or what's going on?
I see it, but I'm wondering if anyone on the HomeSmart side sees it. I wanted to make sure that they see it.
Well, it can be twofold. Typically, it's agent services. They can go in there and make sure that they're seeing what you're doing. But also, it can be me or Don sometimes. Because let me see here. Well, I'll look.
What it boils down to, Marty, is when we're uploading, it puts it all in the inbox, and the distribution and where it goes happens on your side. And I think that confuses some agents because they feel like, I want this form to be here and I want this form to be there. And there's
it goes like the one box.
and they
It
all
goes
go
in the
together.
inbox. Sometimes though, what I'm hearing as well, I can be on the phone with Norma, and Norma said, I just uploaded my form, but I see it on my side. Sometimes we don't see it on our side. So there's a disconnect, and sometimes we have to call our development team and say, all right, there's a problem with the system. You know, let's fix this. But she's clearly uploading. I can log in as her and see them, but they're not showing up on the backside. Other times, to your point, we've had agents upload documents and then not save it or not go forward, and they start over again. So I'm just trying to figure out the problem at this point in time. Whether it's just, you got them there in their one box, and then paperwork sorting them for Don and I to look at them, or you know what the issue is. So it could be a number of things that we've seen.
I think the turnaround time is kind of slow right now too. I called yesterday. I submitted a termination 5 days ago. And when I called the transaction number, they said, it's a 24-hour turnaround. And I said, well, it's been 5 days because it still says pending because I wanted to upload the new contract because I have a new contract on it. And I can't upload anything because it still says pending.
Yep, that's probably on me and Don right now. We've got we got a
Thanks, Gail. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry,
for that.
throw you under the bus.
No, I appreciate it, and thanks for the patience as well. We've got a broker review person that's been doing this for like the last 15 years, whatever. That's been MIA mostly, either on vacation, been sick, or whatever. So we've been buried. So then it falls to Don and I to catch up on the slack. So we're behind. So have patience. We'll get there, and we'll probably be getting more help. So just FYI. But anything like that, we get emails and calls every day that if something's been longer, make sure you email the broker email. We'll take care of it for you. So if you're waiting on like that, just let us know. And I'll make sure Don takes care of it for you.
You don't need to sleep, Don.
Yeah. It's only slightly joking there because, we'll get it one way or another. So Don's been great. Okay. Besides that, anything else going on? You guys see in the market? Listings, buyers, renters?
Michelle, do you have your hand up again, or did you just?
Oh, no. I'm done.
Oh, okay. All right.
Did you see my thing? Oh, I know we got off the topic. Were you looking for me?
I didn't see your thing yet, but while we're
It
still
was sent like a while back, so I probably need to call the agent services. Do I?
and ask them what's going on. Let's see.
Okay.
Let me
Okay.
see if hold on.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
No, you're fine. Let's see. Oh,
I have a question about a form. Is it necessary when you give money back to the the buyer that you have a separate form showing that you did that, or just show it on your CDA?
It's not required to have the commission waiver letter. That's something that came over from Champions, that builders, attorneys, and some brokers want to see something from a letterhead perspective from the brokerage saying it's okay to give or give a concession to your buyer. So we have it available, and oftentimes most of our agents use it for that reason, because of those people, mostly builders. But no, your CDA is the direction for
Okay.
commission. So if you want to
Because
credit,
I had one yesterday, and I want to make sure I didn't need that additional form for it.
no, it's not required. It's one of those things that if you need further clarification, we have that form available. So
Yeah, usually
Gotcha.
title company wants to see it. They want to see that somebody that the broker approved the commission shifting from agent to whoever.
mhm.
It's a title company thing. Yeah.
It's available for when other parties need it. So basically,
Okay.
but we don't require it. So the
Then I
CDA
got
is
Then I got another question.
Okay.
Anybody had any kind of interaction with new builders that will consider for modifications for disabled people?
interesting. So yeah, modifying the house in construction to accommodate a disabled person.
Right, because I got a client that needs 3-foot wide doors to get through with his
Okay.
electric scooter.
Actually,
And-
yeah, there are more and more builders are looking at building an ADA compliant product so people can age in place, as opposed to, having to be moved out and move somewhere.
Right.
And I'm trying to think of who the builder was that I saw the other
Highlands.
day that was doing that.
Highlands is the only one that has told me on the phone, but I want to go in person and make sure it wasn't just a sales pitch from a salesperson, that it's for real. So
I would guess that most, if you're working with any builder, anytime you make modifications like that, it would be a payment up front, like almost like some of the upgrades would be,
Yeah.
where they're, but they would allow it and say, all right, we're making a modification to, here's the upfront cost to your buyer for the changes that you wouldn't get back, obviously, if they backed out of it.
yeah,
I'm guessing.
Especially widening hallways and things like that, because in order to do that, you're taking away from somewhere. You're taking away
Yeah.
from room sizes. You're doing something. So yeah.
I know it's really changes the architecture in the house, but I got a Navy SEAL who was injured in service, who's got a nice VA limit and wants to get build a home with modifications. So, but he wanted in Chambers Creek, but he would have loved that Toll Brothers house, but they wouldn't do the modifications.
Yeah, without charging them or at all. So they probably want to keep the stability of, I don't know. It's
Even
not required
without-
by AD. Yeah. Huh?
It's even without the charge, Marty, they just wouldn't do it. They told him he had to do it after the fact.
Wow. You would think they would have, like Don said, it's more and more building that way. So, all right. Well, I'm going to look into that for you. So, huh?
I'm gonna try Highland and see if that really is true. But sometimes you get a younger, newer salesperson, they'll tell you anything you ask them is yes. Not that we older people don't do that.
To get you in the door, right? Hey, Norma, you have a question? Go ahead and mute yourself.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Good morning.
Morning.
I just got a question. I have a niece and an ex-client. He wants to sell a properties in Mexico. So I need some help. I don't know if you want me to contact you later or you can help me right now, because I don't have any experience. And one of the properties is a commercial. It's a building. So when to start or how. I know we have an HAR, international HAR, but I don't know. I just pause the property, or I don't know. I need a little help.
And I think your timing is perfect. Now, Don and I are not experts in selling in Mexico. So we'll first of all start over there, but definitely reach out to us after the call. One of our agents who left and came back to us went to learn specifically this, how to market and sell properties in Mexico. So we'll connect you with Paulette, and maybe you guys can strategize and collaborate together. But that's what she did. So knowing somebody that knows something is always key, right? For the source of the source. So definitely reach out, and I'll connect you and Paulette and get things started.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Michelle, did you have another question?
So, speaking on a couple of questions back, whenever like the brokers are pulling us up to look under the broker's number, ID number, they're still recognizing us as champions.
Yep. Now, good timing on this, by the way. That's going to change very, very soon. HomeSmart acquired Champions in 2022, and without going through, basically, when they acquired it, they would have to send an invitation to every single agent on the roster at the time, about 2,000, and saying, please have a new invitation to HomeSmart instead. And they decided to say, you know what, we're going to maintain the Champions name. We're going to acquire it, be HomeSmart doing business as Champions, and then at some point in the future, we'll do that. Well, at some point in the future, it's happening very soon. So I have a call tomorrow on doing just that. So it'll probably be in the next month or so that we'll, all be under HomeSmart. But it's kind of a big undertaking to take over. So
Okay.
that's
Yeah,
why.
I was trying to explain it. I was like, they took them over. I was like, it's a whole bunch of like stuff like behind the scenes or whatever. And they were just like, okay.
We've seen that a lot with our W9s as well. It's HomeSmart and Champions. We're doing as Champions, even though we're HomeSmart. It's been something that has been a pain trying to deal with for a while. Like I said, the end of that road is coming up very soon. So it won't be an issue, hopefully 60, 90 days from now. So we're good.
Okay, question about that.
Who's talking?
Me.
Oh,
I have a question about that. They had us when we first came over to HomeSmart immediately get all HomeSmart labeled stuff after a certain date. So since it's really on the books as Champions Real Estate Group, could we not have continued using the signs that said Champions Real Estate Group up till now?
Technically, probably. Yeah.
I had like 30 signs to do open houses.
Yeah.
That I had to just set aside and not use.
Yeah, I know. I get it. But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I think they expected this transition to happen faster than it did. And then, of course, it's always the idea that how much work will this be from a statewide perspective, and then adopting that licensure and transferring all the licenses. I think that was it. But they want to get the HomeSmart name out there. We still are HomeSmart. It just operating in two fashions, as HomeSmart in Dallas and as Champions here in Houston. That, like I said, that's changing. So to your point, probably. Sorry. Jose, you're up next.
Well, I just had a comment about the paperwork. Whenever I have an issue with paperwork, all I do is I send an email to the paperwork department, and the turnaround time is quick. So that takes care of any paperwork issues with me.
We've had a lot of restructuring at the corporate level as far as paperwork as well. They've got different teams over there, but thanks, Jose. Gina Shim over there runs the sort of paperwork, transaction services, clothing team now, and it's been a lot better. I mean, it's amazing. So they're responsive, things get done. And like right now, I think that the what's the word I'm looking for? The clog in the pipeline right now is the broker review, and we'll get that taken care of surely. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up again. Thank you.
Norma, your hand's still up, or you have another question?
Sorry, I forgot about the hand. Sorry.
No, you're good. Just want to make sure. I got you. Here we go. Perfect. All right. Michelle, I found your file here. I'm not seeing your transaction in there, so we'll definitely get you connected with transaction services and see if we can figure out what's going on. I looked into your page and our page, and there's all I see is a buyer broker agreement. That's all I see. So we'll figure it out. All right. You're talking. Yeah,
So you see the buyer broker agreement, right?
I do.
Okay. I wonder. Okay. Yeah. I need help with the other stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I see the buyer broker agreement. I see, looks like you've got that in there and 8 miscellaneous. So we see it on our HUD. So.
Okay. Right.
And I see a lease application. Okay, good. All right. Well, any other questions? Anything's going on with your market or marketing? Jose, go ahead.
Well, I closed a transaction about maybe a week ago.
Mhm.
So yeah, a week ago, and a week after we closed, we had an incident. Apparently the carbon monoxide detector was ringing. So the buyer wanted the seller to do something about it, but obviously I did reach out to the seller, and what he said is, as much as we like to help you out, we already closed on this transaction, and we don't want to be liable for anything. If something happens at the property, we don't want to be liable for it, and that's how they took care of it. It's and that it doesn't happen often, but once every other 2 years, something like that comes up. Is that the best way to handle that?
Yeah, unfortunately it is. I mean, you're there to help, and obviously you've helped through the process when things happen after the fact. You can still be the source of the source, and Don can correct me here too. But if you have contractors, you have people that they can work, say, here's people I worked with in the past, you can call them, but it's not your responsibility. You can say, you can refer them and give them information. That's it.
Yeah, I think I like the language that I no longer have that authority. Not only am I not able to, I don't have the authority anymore. It's not, I'm just not there anymore.
Catherine?
I had a incident with one of my early leases with my stepson and daughter-in-law. I'd helped them into actually a house that was for sale. It took it off the market. It was in Kingwood, where it flooded. And this was a fairly new house, and they had to go in and do the remediation. And after the family moved in, to make a long story short, the place was overrun with ants so bad that it was in my granddaughter's hair. It was in her bed. They were in her bed. They were in her toys. And my daughter-in-law called me crying and telling me to get them somewhere else to live. Well, that's when I ran into the fact, the minute you're done with that lease, you're out of it. Mm-hmm. It's no responsibility of yours, and you're not allowed to go in. Because I was like, well, I'm going to get her out of this, move her somewhere else. You know me, pull my trigger, I'm going to make a move. But I had to tearfully let her know we had to just fight through it. We did, but it was really hard.
Yeah, it is hard, especially when someone, a family member or whatever, you want to make a difference, but you don't have authority, as Don says, to work on their behalf anymore. Exactly. You're not property management. Yeah, you're not an attorney, so you have to give them to the right appropriate people. Which kind of is, on a little side note, Don posted a couple of days ago about the absurdity of trying to be an intermediary when you are one of the principals. I love that. Unless you have multiple personalities, it's very clever, Don. But we got something recently that is akin to that, where we have, in Catherine's case, let's say Catherine is representing her daughter and she wants to be intermediary. I think it's the same thing. Even though Catherine's not the owner, she cannot be impartial to both parties and give advice if she's representing a family member.
Too close.
We've got several of those recently. I'm like, you can't do this. I understand it's not you personally, but it's your father, it's your mother, it's whatever. You're too close to be this. So the other side needs to know your relationship, and they need to know that they can go unrepresented or work for somebody else, but you cannot be an intermediary for both. Just thought that would be, since you mentioned that, it's true. We all have this intention here, but you can't be impartial when you're that close to them. So
Yeah, the real estate commission, when intermediary really first started to get to be a thing, that they even went as far as to say that if you have more of a relationship with one side than you do the other, like let's say that the seller is somebody that you've had multiple transactions with over time, that you really should think about whether or not the other side would really truly believe that they were being treated equally as somebody that you've had more of a relationship with over the years.
and then how much of a disclosure you have to make, right? Let's say
Right, yeah, and suppose that's the other part. You're right, that it's supposed to show up in that intermediary relationship notice, in that notification form. It's supposed to say whether or not you've had a previous relationship with either of the parties, and I think that gets overlooked an awful lot.
I like to, obviously my experience from different states. That's one of the things that Washington State did that we don't do here, is even when it came down to inspectors, we had to disclose if we use that inspector on a regular basis.
Oh, wow.
Because you have established a relationship with them, right? They want to know if it's okay. Is it a group of people that they referred out to, or is it something that does all your inspections, right? It's all about, is the buyer, is the seller, is the tenant or the landlord informed, right, of your intentions? And are you putting their interest above your own? So in all cases, disclose, and document. Right? So,
Yep.
Gimla or Clarence or Catherine Gibbs or anybody else have any questions? See who else is here. Aaron's been quiet for a while, or Laura. You guys gonna have any questions? If Aaron, I know Aaron's on here, she may not be listening. She's also one, Norma, that had commercial experience. She may not have commercial experience in Mexico, but she might be someone to talk to. I'll connect you with her too. Okay. That it? Need more coffee? All right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to follow up with Michelle. I'm going to follow up with Norma. Anybody else I need to follow up with on these? I think we're good, right?
I think we have our broker line question of the day already set, ready to go. Is one that I got earlier today.
What's that?
An agent had done a commission waiver for, I don't know, $12,000-$13,000 to their client, and the lender only allowed about half of that. And so the question came up is, can we cut the buyer a check for the rest of it after closing? And it's like, well, it depends. Do you like living in a gated community in Huntsville, Texas?
Prison, yeah. Right. Oh man,
That
obviously
was so wrong, Don.
Yep. I love the humor part of it, though. As we know, when the section there for talks about closing costs and expenses says up to is what it says. The idea here is whatever amount there, if the lender does not allow more, well, who does the money go to? If you don't do anything, the money goes back to the seller, because it was a credit from the seller to the buyer towards the closing costs. So if you want the buyer to recoup that, you have to amend the contract and either lower the price or whatever. But we've also seen agents try to, I'll increase my commission amount and then I'll give it to the buyer. No, you can't do that either. Now, what you do after closing is up to you. But the point is, you can't pay a buyer, commission. The idea is you're not going to increase yours and then pay the buyer. You can't do it. That the total compensation or total credit to the buyer is limited by the lender. As Don's point was, that's mortgage fraud if we do anything outside of that. So we don't want that. So if you want to, let's say it's $1,000 or $5,000 difference, you have to amend the contract. And typically the best way is to drop the price. If they're going to be willing to give the credit, drop the price. Otherwise, it's not the buyer's money, at that point in time.
Yeah, that's when the seller's doing it, you're right. That contract says an amount not to exceed. So if you put $8,000 in there and the lender only allows 5, you've lived up to the terms of the contract. I mean, it did not exceed $8,000. And, you know, I've had that personally happen at a closing, where if the expectation was, well, you're just going to give me the rest in cash. It's like, yeah, I don't think so. It's not the way it works. Not the way it works.
A question.
Yes.
Question on this. So what you just said is this is a seller contribution, but what about the buying agents pulling out of their commission and giving to the buyer at closing?
Yep.
That's what this question actually was. Yeah.
Yeah. It's because they have a concession to the buyer. Total concession amount is limited by the lender. So whether it comes from the seller or from the agent, it's the
That's
total
what I want
amount.
clarification on right there.
Right. And so if let's say that the seller is contributing 5,000 and the lender allows 6,000 and the agent wants to give 3,000, the agent's limit would be 1,000. The remainder is either the agent keeps more, or, you know, or the seller gives less, you know, right? You have a few options there, or drop the price a bit. And the agent can credit the seller at that point in time if you wanted to give your money away. But generally, you'd have to amend your CDA and you keep more of your money because you can't give it. So,
Right.
Okay. Well, I texted you on the one yesterday, Marty. So you probably read it already.
probably, maybe.
Yeah. And if you want to
While you
prove
were
that point,
sleeping.
you can tell them, I'll be glad to give you the rest of the money as soon as I get something in writing from the lender saying it's okay to give it to you.
Yeah, exactly. Don's went through that. Yeah,
But
it never happened.
I didn't have a problem with the lender limiting the one I dealt with yesterday, but that's good to know.
I will say that one thing, I'll go to Laura right after this. This is one thing I've seen multiple states as well, and the contracts are a little bit different wherever you're at. But when it comes to an amendment to the contract where you're negotiating repairs, and if you say per inspection report XYZ to be done, you cannot withhold that from the lender. That is part of the contract. The lender gets the entire contract. We've had people, I've had mortgage lenders say, don't send that over. You know, but they're saying that don't send it over because the loan will be denied or they'll require the work to be done, which again is mortgage fraud, which is a Class C felony. So if you include it in the contract, it has to go to the lender. Don, thoughts?
Well, no, you're right. If you've made a part of the contract, the lender is supposed to see the entire contract.
Yep. So if that's a concern and the buyer wants to take a concession in lieu of repairs, ask for the concession. Don't ask for repairs. You know, ask for a price reduction, ask for a credit toward closing only because the lender sees everything. Laura, you had a question. Laura?
Did we lose her?
No, I'm right here. I'm
There
just
There you go.
hard to figure out how to unmute. But hey, Marty, that commercial deal that I did last September, we still have not been paid.
They still this is the one for your sister or is it a different one?
Yeah, the 110 Milby.
Okay. And they haven't paid. Okay. Send me an email so I can
Okay.
follow up on it.
Is that a commercial lease?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I have reached out to them a few times here and there, and at one point he said that they were mailing the check and the check never arrived. I don't think he ever sends it, to be honest.
Right. Check in the mail.
You got that check right along with all those checks from all those apartment complexes that.
Right. That's where it's at.
Okay. Yeah, it's email again, so I'll follow up on that. I know that what's funny is 2 of those apartment locator things that we've been waiting for like 4 or 5 months, honestly. Finally got checked off the list. They finally came in. So yes, those are satisfying when we actually get these things off our list. Yes, Nelly.
Good morning. So,
Morning.
Marty, I helped a friend finally an apartment, and it's been 60 days, and they haven't sent me the payment. Well, they haven't submitted payment. So they say it was going to be paid within 60 days, and it still hasn't happened. So how long do we wait?
Yeah.
Do we?
So we're talking about apartment locator stuff. We were just talking about that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So send me an email on the apartment complex so I can find out if they're part of a group. That's one of the problems is some of them get paid directly, or they pay just out of the invoice, and you send them an invoice. I'm assuming the apartment locator invoice, right?
I did right away.
Yeah. Right. So, and they said they pay. So, just send me the contact information and the invoice so I can follow up on it. But sometimes they want us to go in and take the invoice to a third-party vendor where you like submit an invoice through the corporate, and they pay us that way. We've got Don and I talk about this, but I've got 8 different places I log into, 3 different pay modes, and it is absolutely ridiculous. Yeah.
They set it up that way intentionally, hoping that it caused so much trouble that eventually you'll just let it go. It's
Yeah.
like, you know what? Forget it. Yeah.
The old word is flexibility brings complexity.
Yeah, right. It is a nightmare, and then they switch systems. It's crazy. So you have to register with one platform and pay your annual dues to receive money, and then you have to go to another platform to submit an invoice. And on some, and then they're all, it depends on which group they're associated with. It is annoying. So I'll send me an email, Nelly, and we'll see if we can follow up on it.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Gail.
Yeah, I had a question for Nellie, actually. Do you
Sure.
help people look for apartments quite often? Because I have someone who needs to find one, and that's not something I'm willing to do because it's kind of far away too. Between downtown and Fulshire, 2 people are going to be living together and they want to meet somewhere in the middle.
Wow. That's only a 50-mile stretch.
Only, right?
Ellie.
I'm
wanna
near
re-
downtown, so yeah, that's fine.
So could I get your number to share with them?
Yeah, I can send it to you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Good. See, look, doing
Networking.
right here on the call. Networking. Thanks. That's good. And a few more to follow on to. Sounds good. All right. We are at time. Any last questions before we go?
Where is Nelly getting this invoice for the apartment locating? Is it something that's in our toolbox?
In your download section of Real Smart Agent, it's an apartment locator invoice. Now, some of those things, for those that haven't done them before, well, again, there's no buyer tenant rep, there's no IABS, so you're not actually representing the tenant. You're just pointing them to the right direction. And so you create the invoice, you send it to the apartment, whatever they tell you for the placement of the tenant, and then we wait basically for us to pay them to pay us. Now, as far as the file creation now, our process is once the check comes in, you send in by email that invoice, and we create a miscellaneous file for you. It is crazy, it's doesn't follow any normal pattern. So, and then we follow up on that. So, but if we get a check, we don't know what it's lined up to, so we have to create the file for it. So.
Also, too, apartment. I guess this will be a question for Nelly. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm expending y'all time out with all my crazy questions, but apartment data. I think they went out of business or whatever because the accounts aren't available anymore. So, Nelly, is there any software or MLS kind of thing like apartment data that you're using to locate those apartments?
Honestly, I don't know. I just happen to be familiar with that area. And that's how I kind of find out just driving around, honestly.
Yeah, because there used to be a database and it doesn't exist anymore. Looks like and where you could go in and look at the apartments and it shows like the commission and the rates and stuff like that where you could send like lists like to your client.
Yeah, I heard about that one. It's been a while, but yeah, I was just happened to be driving in near the area.
Okay.
Now, Michelle, double check on that too, because I still have an account with apartment data. So
you did?
I do. I just put it in the link there. So it's working for me. And I still get a weekly email with all the different deals. All
Okay.
right. Yeah.
I don't get that. That's interesting. Okay. I'm going to have to probably contact them and see.
Sounds good. All right, guys. Have a good day.
Thank you all.